Hello and welcome to the Collapse Curriculum Podcast. This is Justin McAfee. I'm here with my co-host, Mike Paxinos, and this is episode 2 of our newly started podcast here. And we talk about collapse. We talk about a lot of things. That's kind of the name of the podcast because it's one of the concerns that's happening in the world with all sorts of things like climate change and planetary boundaries, topics like resource usage, things like that. And this is kind of a foundational topics today. We're talking about just sort of the status of collapse today, or our trajectories, if you will, the trends, things like that. Last week we talked about some of the historical things about collapse, like societies that have collapsed, over the last several thousand years. Mm-hmm. Including Rome and the Mayan Empire. And I've written about other places as well. Interestingly enough, some places have walked away from complex society, if you will, because they didn't find it worked very well. But what we'll talk about today is where we are in the world. And I thought the perfect place to start that conversation was with a study called The Limits to Growth. And if you're watching this, there's a good chance you've heard of it, but maybe not. So we want to kind of dive into that a little bit. How you doing, Mike?
Good. It was good article. Looking forward to talking about it. There's a lot of good stuff to talk about. So, yeah.
So the Limits to Growth is a study. It was published as a book in 1972. And it was, it was a research project at MIT, and the researchers used what's called a systems dynamics model, or modeling. Mm-hmm. So system dynamics is often used to explain complex systems and how each part of those systems affect the other when you're looking at a lot of variables.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about something like collapse, there's a lot of variables, right?
Yeah, there's that's what I really liked about it, is that with the systems theory there is that there isn't just one thing to worry about. Like, for example, resources and food and stuff. There's also let's break it down first to wildlife. Like, I don't know, let's just say fish, okay, in a pond someplace. Their population growth is inherent in the sense that it depends on how many fish you start with. So there's a variable. And obviously the growth rate, the birth rate, and the gestation and everything, but also not just the food that they need, but who are the predators around them. So that has a big thing to do with the birth rate as opposed to the death rate, and even that system of the predators, they have their own system as well to deal with. So it is a very complex thing. But if we elevate this to humans, we're each other's prey, in a sense. We got it's a really dynamic and complicated thing to try to sort out when you have so much. Because I would like to do more research to see if there really is enough resources, which I think there are on Earth, to feed everybody for an extensive for indefinite, well, not indefinite, but I think there is enough resources to help 8 billion people around the world. That seems like a lot of people, but when you look at Earth and you look at what's out there, I think there's enough. But the question is, who are the predators that are taking these resources and not allotting them to where they need to go? And why is that happening? We can look at economics, capitalism, socialism. We can, there's a lot of, it's like you said, there's so many variables. and even the predators, they have their own predators. And you know, when we in the prey, we you know, it even the prey or predators in other areas. Yeah, it's just so. It's so complicated, and I don't, you know, how do you get that balance out? It's a difficult thing to talk about or to find a solution for. Yeah.
All right, so that brings up some interesting thoughts. Actually, where you were talking about food, for example. I wonder if I can. Let me see if I can share. This is the result of the limits to growth study that came up in 1972.
Oh, okay, good.
These are I would say these are 4 scenarios that they came up with that encompass more or less all 12 of the scenarios that they did. You see BAU, which stands for business as usual. BAU2 is business as usual. And the only thing, they put a 2 on there, right? And the only thing that they did, you can look in the middle of the chart where it says resources.
Yeah.
On the left side, on the right side, the resources are exactly double. So you start out with twice as many resources as they sort of, in business as usual, the normal one, the first one, rather, they looked at the trajectory of how many resources we were finding. And this is more like raw materials.
Oh, okay.
Like, nickel, cobalt, fossil fuels, whatever, that kind of stuff. And what they did is they assumed that the trend that was present in 1972 from 100 years ago prior, or from 1900, this is likely how many resources we'll have available over the next, 125 years, because it goes to 2100. And then in business as usual too, they actually just double that number because a lot of people were saying, well, we're going to find more mineral extractive resources. And so,
okay, so
then you have a couple of scenarios. Go ahead.
Is it hypothetical then? Because I'm looking at that as, unless I'm reading it wrong, 2000 to 2100. So they're just looking at hypothetical, or as far as some mathematical model to predict it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the systems dynamics modeling that they used. They started out with empirical data,
right?
But then they're extracting, sort of extrapolating rather, into the future. Okay.
Okay.
Now, with these other 2 scenarios, CT is comprehensive technology. So that assumes, the resources are the same, but it assumes that technological advances will reduce pollution. Because what you can see, the difference between CT and BAU2 is the pollution.
Right. Yeah.
So CT could be describing, not only, but potentially renewable energy, things like that reduce pollution. I mean, you can look at business as usual 2 there and see the pollution as being carbon pollution.
Right. Right.
But it could be other things as well, but that could be one of the major outcomes. Okay. And then in the bottom right corner, you have what's called stabilized world scenario. And in that scenario, we, as a world, decide to change our priorities. So in that scenario, we decide, instead of economic output or industrial output, you can see that's one of the things on the graph at all 4 of them, right? Resources, industrial output, population, food, and pollution. Those are they're looking at those 5 things and how they interact with each other.
Oh, okay.
And so
those are the basic variables that they're looking at to sustain humanity, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so in that stabilized world scenario, they're kind of doing what you suggested, which is if we changed our priorities, It went away from the accumulation of large amounts of wealth and focused on human well-being. Let's say we decided we would create a human well-being economy where that was the priority. Then the stabilized world scenario is the likely outcome. We reduce pollution. The human population stabilizes. Industrial output, rather than continuing to go up, about right now where we are, we're kind of at an intersection point where if industrial output continues to grow, the likely result is going to be more pollution, and it's going to be a collapse of the human population and of society. But if we were to choose a different direction and say, okay, we're going to create a circular economy or a degrowth economy, then and focus our economy not on growth, but on human well-being, then at least Gaya Herrington believes that we could maintain our quality of life. In fact, it would improve for a lot of people and not see the worst scenario like we see in business as usual too. If you look at the population, if you look at the food production, you look at the resources, they all crash, and so does industrial output. And you can see we're at the threshold right now where we are. So Gaya Herrington's, if you look at the article, and I'll post a link to it if you haven't read it yet, but in my present day trends of a collapsing society, I talk about Gaya Herrington is a sustainability researcher, and she was at Harvard when she did this 50-year follow-up to this study. So it was 2022.
That's a long study. That's a long shit. I mean, so it's you get a study that's 50 years long. Obviously, you can't blame that on the short-term studies as far as it's only been studied for 5 years, kind of thing, which is a common accusation, against climate change, is that there isn't enough data or stuff. But 50 years is a pretty long time to study something. So from 1972 to 2022, we have empirical data to check against their predictions, right? Or
their model outcome, right? What's the word again? Forecast or whatever, extrapolation. And it turns out, that these were the one that's most closely aligned with the empirical data is business as usual too, and comprehensive technology. It doesn't look like it's still, she believes it would be technically possible to go for a stabilized world scenario, although she doesn't see any trends in that direction as like with the people that have power in the world. And then with the comprehensive technology scenario, she doesn't see the technological advancement and implementation yet. Again, we could shift our priorities, but she believes, and I think she's right, that our priorities as a global society are on business as usual, and it's...
Well, yeah, I can see that. When she says we haven't implemented technological, what did advances, or what did she mean by that exactly? Because we got some pretty good technology. When we look at and again, technology that could be part of the problem or it could be part of the solution. A lot of it depends on what we want to do with it. But it's when it comes to technology, at least I know in America, it's so shocking to me. It's like, remember in the 90s, we didn't even know the internet. It's not like the internet wasn't around. I guess the internet, from what I heard, the internet was classified. It's been around since the 60s or 70s or something like that. It's just that the public wasn't able to access it. And then they declassified it and allowed the public to use it in the 90s. And we didn't know what it was. We didn't know much about it. We had to just play around with it as a society and figure it out. And then once we figured it out, boom, huge explosion comes around. And then we don't know much about AI. It just comes on it just kind of snuck up on us. And boom, here we are with it, and we're just playing around with it, and hopefully we can get a grasp at it. And I was just wondering, my question is then, what are some of these technologies that aren't you can't predict what kind of technologies are going to happen. I mean, we can speculate, I guess, and that makes a big difference with the studies that I think she was doing. Is like, what technology have we not implemented yet? I think we're pretty advanced with that. It just seems like we haven't grasped it. We don't really know how to control it. It's like, with AI, I don't see us finding some kind of regulations yet. I mean, there's some, but we're trying, I guess. But with the internet, there wasn't until later on until we figured out what it was. And the social media, that just came on, and we didn't figure that out, and then put some regulations on. And now AI, it's like, at some point as a society, what do we have to do to let these technologies not control us, and instead give us the pilot seat?
So here's what I wrote about. I said that her analysis highlights that while some technological advancements and policy changes have occurred, they have not been sufficient to shift the world onto a more sustainable trajectory. She says there's zero evidence of so-called green growth, and her work has reaffirmed the urgency of addressing environmental and resource challenges identified in the original study, underscoring that without significant course correction, the dire predictions of societal decline could become reality within this century. And if you look at the charts, within the next 25 years. Resource scarcity is becoming more pronounced as essential materials like fresh water, arable land, and fossil fuels are being consumed at unsustainable rates. And despite technological advancements and efforts to improve efficiency, the demand for these resources continues to rise, outpacing the Earth's capacity to replenish them. So, in other words, whatever technological advances have occurred, going back to that chart, they haven't changed the trajectory of any of these things. The pollution,
right,
like fossil fuel pollution, still going up. There's no signs that pollution is decreasing.
Right.
There's no sign that our use of resources is leveling off, like you would see in the comprehensive technology scenario. And so then I think one of the things is that, like, pollution is going to affect food production, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I mean, that's interesting because, I wonder if technology could, if we used it right, or if we figured out how to use it better, if that could decrease the pollution, or is it because there's no profit in it? Maybe I don't know. I know with electric vehicles, they're they decrease somewhat the carbon, exhaust and such, but there's a trade-off with EVs as well. It's like you go mine and there's you're tearing up the ecosystem, and you need oil to build EVs in the first place. So it's and I think the research does show that EVs are definitely a decrease the CO2 even with all their mining and all that. So it's good. It's a good step forward. But I don't think it's in the long run, is it going to stabilize things? I don't know.
Yeah, so there's several different, I would say, questions involved here. One is about technology. So one person could say, is there any kind of advanced technology that is sustainable at all? But then there's another question too, which is being asked by this study, which is more about growth itself. It's not necessarily saying technology isn't sustainable. It's mostly saying growth isn't sustainable. Like, there are limits to growth, essentially.
Yeah.
And it's hard for most people to believe that, like I've said before, because you look at the last 5,000 years, and especially the last 2,000, especially the last few hundred years.
Yeah.
And you see that, okay, we've grown past the carrying capacity of landscapes that we used to live in tenfold, if not more. And we've used technology to do that.
Right. Right.
Right? As we mentioned last time, there's 8 billion people on the planet. There was a billion people 225 years ago.
Yeah.
So the fossil fuel industrial revolution stuff has really given us the ability to have that kind of number. I mean, we just couldn't have done it in 1800.
No, we couldn't. I mean, so it's yeah. I don't want to come across either. I'm against technology. I'm not. I love it, especially AI. I love what it can do. But what I don't love is being so haphazard with it and not making an effort to try to control it to some degree. I mean, it's not gonna. We make our lives better with technology, but when I say better, though, we have to define that. I think I don't think we're any more happy with technology. You know, I don't think it makes our lives happier. I mean, you get people stuck on their phones forever. You know, the texting and social media, and you're scrolling. So it interrupts with the social fabric of our society, definitely. But it certainly does make things easier for us that we would never have been able to do in the past, and especially with medicine. You know, I guess now AI is able to detect cancer cells at a very early stage now that they couldn't before, and that saves a lot of lives. So, I just think there has to be some kind of regulations with our technology. Otherwise, it just gets out of control, and our brains don't know what to do with it.
The technology, I mean, I think you could make arguments about technology. I mean, we were talking about cancer, right? And
yeah,
how much of cancer is caused by the processes that we use to extract minerals or pollution in the environment, plastics. Mm-hmm. I've heard everyone, including babies, have microplastics in their body, probably. You know?
Yeah.
And that may be contributing to infertility rates as well. And so, yeah, I mean, I actually wrote a chapter in my book. It's called the Myth of Neutral Technology. You might check that out sometime. And in there, I'd sort of make the argument that it's like a lot of times the argument is made that technology is neutral, that it's just a tool. Kind of like the argument that says guns don't kill people, people kill people, right? Like a gun doesn't kill anyone, right?
Yeah.
And so, but the sort of counter argument to that is that technology is rarely made in a vacuum. You know what I mean? There is certainly scale to technology that requires enormous amounts of input. Like, you know, to make a hammer, I could probably make a hammer as an individual. So the scale of making a hammer, depending on the type of hammer it is pretty small. I mean, worst case scenario, I might, needs a little bit of help from someone else. Mm-hmm. But with a lot of advanced technology, it requires entire fields of study and experts to dedicate their lives to that.
Right.
To that particular thing, right?
Yeah.
And so that requires investment in that area, and I think if you think about someone's life, in history, in the past, before universities existed, I don't think they probably spent 12 years of grade school and then go on to spend another 7 years or more in higher education to become a specialist in something like that. Mm-hmm. So that's an interesting result,
right.
For good or ill. We could argue with the merits of what it's like to. I mean, I enjoyed school to some degree, obviously. I really love learning. That's why I do what I do. I like writing,
Yeah, you're good at it too.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Hopefully we'll get better at the podcasting too, but that's why we're here. We're doing it. Yeah. And, it does cross my mind. I wonder if, what years would be like spent, if you didn't have to go to school for all of these things and dedicate your time in life. A lot of times people work a lot of hours, and
Yeah.
I had a friend that I think he works in the aeronautical science industry kind of thing, like NASA stuff or military stuff or whatever. And, not someone I hear from anymore. And that can be for other reasons. I don't know. It's just anecdotal here. But, you get into a highly specialized field like that. A lot of times it can absorb your whole life. And again, some people like that. That's what it's all about to them.
That's purpose. I mean, if you have a certain purpose in your life, you want to absorb into it and consume yourself with it, and that's okay as long as you're not neglecting your other priorities like your family and so forth. But I think we all need to have a purpose, and that's good. That's all right, I think, anyway. You did remind me of something. Like, remember, back to your point about guns. People kill people, guns don't kill people because it's just a tool, which is correct. But interesting enough, now that we're getting into AI, we're teaching it how to think for itself, which means, is it possible, like EV, or autonomous vehicles, if you get an AI glitch, it isn't the driver that's killing anybody now. It can override certain things, and AI can. It may get to the point where we, right now we can certainly use, it's a solid argument to say, to me anyway, that guns don't kill people because it's just an inanimate object and it doesn't think for itself. But when we get to AI, things change. We're into a different ballgame now. And I don't think it's like that now, but as fast as it's growing, I mean, maybe, it could be now, I guess, but I haven't seen any evidence that it is. But the point is, AI can learn quick without us, and it's just that argument won't hold when it comes to AI. So that's why we have to figure out some regulations with it, because it's an incredible tool. I love it, and I would never want to get rid of it. I just think it's going to be here to stay, and we just need to figure out how to work with it, not against it.
Yeah, I've seen robotic dogs as well as drone helicopters with missiles and machine guns on them that could be piloted by AI. I believe that I've at least read that in the war in Gaza, which, is genocidal, it's ethnic cleansing at the very least, to reduce a population to very small areas inside an already small area. Probably, I don't know, at least 50,000 people. I don't know the current numbers. It goes up all the time. Mm-hmm. But my understanding anyway is that they are using AI to plan the battlefield, essentially, to run the battlefield. I mean, I'm sure they approve the guidance or whatever that they get from AI, but they have, so that's already in the process of happening.
Yeah.
Where battle decisions are being made essentially by AI, which, you can probably try to program morality into it and stuff like that, or law, international law and things like that. But it can also help you do the most ruthless thing possibly. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, definitely. And with AI, it counts on how much data you pour into it, because they have the training. They first do the training mode with it, and they train with all the data and so forth, and then finally they get to the learning part, and that's where a lot of the data laws, I think, should come in place. Like if you look at Zuckerberg, the guy's obsessed with getting people's data. And I think we know why. Yes. Because he's obsessed with AI and wanting to be the leader of AI. Musk, I don't think he's obsessed with data, but he certainly would love it. And I think so whoever can control the data is going to be the leader in AI, because that's what AI is. It feeds off data, just like we feed off our own way to go forward and to learn about certain things. AI can't operate unless there's some data it's fed to learn from. And so whoever controls all the data around the world, well, I mean, you can expect them to be the leader of AI.
So, okay, going back to the limits to growth, when you see this business as usual chart, and we can see the third line over is 2050. When you see that, do you see any chance that, because we're, 2025 here, what do you see the chances of being in 25 years, any of that changes?
Well, it's pretty, I mean, if you look at the pollution, I don't know, the thing's literally off the chart there. I don't know what we're
Right.
going to do if we don't get that under control. It's because that's another, metaphorically speaking, that's another predator. And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it doesn't look
limit-
like from
a
what I
limit to
can see.
growth
I
in
mean,
the
I guess if we
ecosystem.
go down to the CT, what was CT again? I'm sorry.
Comprehensive technology.
Okay, because the pollution obviously
So that's
is
the big difference, is pollution.
Yeah, that's a huge difference. I wouldn't know how to interpret that. I don't know. I mean, because you got one that's off the chart that has no control whatsoever, and it's exponential. And then you got one that's. I mean, there's obviously a hill there, but it's going down.
Well, you can see we are at the point in the middle of those two, in the middle of that third column, right? From the left. That's in time. We're at 2025. And so if you look at the pollution on CT and business as usual too, they're about at the same place. It looks like we peak in pollution in the comprehensive technology scenario in 2050.
Huh. Okay.
So we started slowing it down right about now. So
And
the
that's-
question is, in the next 25 years, if we do anything about pollution, or if we don't do anything about pollution, I mean, these are the two scenarios. The pollution would be related to the reason comprehensive technology would be a scenario is if technological advancements allowed us to reduce the pollution while also continuing to grow economically.
Yeah.
But even there, it looks like industrial output slows some. Or actually, look at that. I mean, by even economic output or industrial output, which is the green dotted line, it
Right.
peaks before 2050 and then starts to go down. Does that make sense? That seems to be the end result, is that industrial output can't be sustained as at a infinite growth level,
Right.
right? You just can't. That doesn't work.
Okay, on the CT, you got the industrial output as a peak. I mean, that's the highest one on the graph. Well, with respect to the resources, but as the industrial output increases, the resources decrease. Right?
Yeah, and that makes sense, right?
Yeah, it does make perfect sense. But from 2000 to 2050, so it peaks out at 2050 in 25 years. And the industrial, almost 25 years it peaks out, but it starts to decline. The population stays the same, but the resources are what's really a problem.
I think the thing to take away is, even with advanced technological salvation, if you will, industrial output itself is going to peak and then decline,
Right.
even with comprehensive technology. So, in fact, you'll notice there really isn't a scenario on this page in which industrial output doesn't go down, except for the one in which we decide to stabilize the world, the last scenario there, and we decide to change our goals away from growth. We're actually able to maintain a certain level of industrial output. So when we look at these, and then we look at who is leading the world, who has power. When you look at this, when you look at these scenarios, which one are you seeing actually happening in the next 25 years, do you think?
Well, geez, I don't know. I mean, it's I I don't know, just it's a hard thing to really extrapolate when I mean I would. It looks like what was SW again? I'm sorry.
Stabilized world.
Stabilized world.
Yeah.
I would like to think, just on the tradition and history of mankind, you got to understand that man. We've been around for thousands of years, millions of years. You know, and granted, we didn't have the technology and stuff, but we always found a way to stabilize ourselves, even in the worst of times. And I think eventually we will stabilize, but it's going to be at a pretty high cost.
Yeah. Okay.
It's not going to be pretty. It will stabilize simply because that's what evolution does. It's an ecosystem. It's always going to balance out somehow, some way, and it's nature always takes it back. That's what I always say. Some way down the road, nature always finds a way to win, so I think eventually we will stabilize out. It's just what kind of sacrifice and cost is that going to, what's the aftermath going to look like, I guess is my question for that.
I think that's fair. I mean, I noted last week that Henry Kissinger, and I quoted him at the top of one of the posts just because it's interesting that someone like him is saying this, but he noted that collapse, which we've defined before as a rapid decline, usually of population and power, that's the rule, not the exception. Every civilization that has existed has collapsed.
Yeah,
except for
I mean,
the ones that are still here.
Exactly. I mean, you can't. I remember an economics professor I had in college, just back in I don't know early '90s or something, but he was giving us a theory about how the wealth in America is it's going to end up collapsing on itself eventually, because it's like the industrial output basically that we have on here. Eventually, it's just going to collapse. There's only so much you can handle before that's it. So there's no ceiling, I guess. When you're, it's like a runaway horse, or runaway train. It's eventually the only way to stop it is when it derails. But it was an interesting theory. It was an interesting theory that he had, and it was it stuck with me a little bit because and this was 25 years ago. I'm sorry, it was 35 years ago, and he was talking about, and the wealth then was extremely. It was early 90s. We've always had this wealth in the country, and we'll look at it now. It's even more so. But the debt is also exceptional too, remarkable compared to then too. So, it goes hand in hand. Wealthy, but we're also extremely in debt too. So what is that? How do you interpret that?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I think we have already been through this cycle within the last century, right? We had a Gilded Age in the United States, and then World War II happened. The Great Depression happened.
Yeah.
And then World War II happened. And so that was it wasn't a collapse, but it certainly was a decline, right? It was a major economic decline, pretty rapid as well.
Yeah. And that reminds
me. So I think
me,
that's, go ahead.
No, in your article in part 2, you made a really good point that collapse doesn't have to be some cataclysmic event where it just happens overnight, or you see a nuclear explosion or something like that, or an apocalypse. It's basically a decline in population, and a rapid decline in population. Just like there was a rapid ascension with population, I mean, it skyrocketed once technology came around. So eventually, does that mean it will have a steep decline because of technology too later on? I don't. So.
Yeah, those are great questions, and I think where this gets really interesting, or should I say scary, is if it was just this scenario that we were talking about, and we see a rapid decrease of population and industrial output, okay, that's not the end of the world per se. It's definitely a dramatic change, and that could involve if the Great Depression led to World War II, imagine what this would lead to potentially. I think In fact, I believe if you look at the politics of the world right now, the direction that it's going in, it tends to lend itself to authoritarianism. It seems to be trending in that direction, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
So that's a sign to me that there is already a response occurring to declining abilities among the empire. You know, you can see inflation. You can see. We talked about it before, right? The people my age and younger, they don't own a home. Like I was talking to my friend who's in his 30s. He's never owned a home. He's always rented. I'm 46. I've never owned a home. And you can just say, "Oh, well, Justin's a slacker. He doesn't count." But I think
No, we don't own a home either. We rent. And
yeah.
maybe I'm a slacker. I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, I have three brothers One of them owns a home. The other two don't. The other two rent as well. So 3 out of 4. And it's not like we were, grew up in a hard situation. Like, my dad's a law professor, retired.
Right.
And, we were raised well and educated and things like that. But, yeah. So I think those are just all trends that we can see. But beyond all of that, there's also the ecological, I think, what we could call collapse. That does get even scarier. Climate change is one, but also, I think I could share this. So this is Stockholm Resilience Center at Stockholm University. But they've been studying planetary boundaries since 2009, and they started out with 7, and they said there was 3 that were crossed. And then in 2015, they did it again, and they said there was 4 that were crossed. And now in 2023, they're saying there's 9 boundaries, and 6 of them are crossed.
What does that mean, crossed? What do they mean by that?
Breached, so the boundary of, for example, CO2 concentration, right? There would be a boundary that they would assign to CO2 levels. And then once you get past that boundary, you're not in a safe operating space anymore.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah. So it's a threshold?
A threshold, yeah.
Yeah, I see.
So these are the 9 categories. Land system change, that's, when you convert ecosystems into urban or suburban areas. I don't know if you've ever watched, you can watch on Google Earth, you can watch time-lapse videos of the Amazon rainforest being cut down over the last 20 or 30 years.
Amazon? Oh, the Amazon rainforest, yeah.
And you can do this anywhere. If you have Google Earth, you can go anywhere on the planet and do a time lapse and see how the satellite images have changed over the last, I think it's 30 years or something like that. Maybe as long as 40 years. And it's kind of shocking to see how much the landscape has changed,
Uh-huh. Well, this is pretty interesting. I've never actually seen this before. I mean, I know that it's in your book and so forth, but I mean, I never studied it.
I'll post a link when we post this podcast here. But fresh water is a big one. The availability of fresh water and stuff like that. So, point is that, again, I don't think that politics is going to change these outcomes per se, or at least not in the immediate future. It might, like you were saying, I kind of agree with you that there will have to be some of this happening, and then it's going to be response. It's going to be, unfortunately, instead of preparatory response, it's going to be response after the fact.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's going to be reactive, and which is typical for us, is because we're very, at least America. I'm not speaking of China or any other country, but America, we tend to be instantaneous in our thinking and short-termed. What can we get right now, rather than so much thinking, well, what's going to happen 50 years from now? And Americans, I think, like I said, overall, I think Americans they would rather our kids and grandkids and great grandkids live on in comfort and without having to. And I think most Americans would be happy to sacrifice immediate pleasures and comfort. And I hate to speak for all Americans. I don't know, maybe not. But I just, from what I see, from when I engage with and as a teacher and just from people, I think most of them, if not all of them, I've never met anyone that doesn't want their posterity to be well taken care of. So.
And that's the thing, like, I think it's worth noting here, and we can talk about this more another time as well, but most of the fossil fuels, for example, are not, they're not put out by people like you and me. I think we're responsible for like 20% of the fossil fuels as individuals, with our cars and our houses and stuff. It's the commercial processes that are the bulk of it. And then like industrial processes and commercial transportation, all those kinds of things. That's where the bulk of it is. And usually the discussion is framed about, well, what can I do? Ride my bike more, or, take shorter showers and things like that. When really that framing is part of the problems because it's inaccurate. That's intentional. The messaging designed to blame for us to feel guilty about what we do every day when we don't really have much choice in a lot of those things, rather than looking at it systemically, like in the government taking responsibility and industry taking responsibility. So
no, that's a very good point. Where we can't blame people for living under a system that we were born into.
I think what we'll do is, I think we've touched on the trends that we're seeing now. When we talk about collapse, and we looked at the limits of growth, and we can see this sort of trajectory that we're on, where at least our, potentially our population and our industrial output might decrease or decline significantly, right? Over the next coming decades. No crystal balls, but these are what the trends show us. So I think, maybe next time we meet and discuss, we can kind of go over part 3 of my series there, and talk about, just establish some of the basics of, do we prepare for this transition, if you want to call it that, for change? How do we respond? We can't do anything about what what NATO does, or what the United States government does. We can vote, right? Or we can protest, we can resist. So I'm not saying don't do any of those things, but a lot of that is outside of our individual control. So what are things that we can do as individuals and in our communities to maybe start talking more about this, and preparing ourselves both physically and mentally for, like if you knew the Great Depression was coming in 1920, what would you have done just to prepare for harder economic times or civil unrest and things like that,
Yeah.
So,
that's great. Being proactive as individuals really is the solution, I think. So,
for sure. Well, I appreciate you coming again for your time, and it's a great discussion. And thanks everyone for tuning into Collapse Curriculum Podcast. Check us out on Substack. The podcast is on Apple, it's on YouTube, and Spotify as well. collapsecurriculum.com. So, all right. We will see you next time.
All right.